Before we get started, just a couple things. First off, Kelly Tomlinson is right there. Kelly, would you raise your hand? I get to work with Kelly on a daily basis at Kermalab. She's a very, very talented designer, but she's also very good at helping me stay organized and planning events. So Kelly has actually come on in an official capacity on Startup Grind to help me with coordinating and managing our events, seeking out sponsorships, that sort of stuff. So Kelly's been a great help for tonight. So if this event goes off without a hitch, it's because of her. So anyways, thank you, Kelly.
And if you know of any sponsorship opportunities, please let me know. I'm always looking for that as well.
Secondly, thanks to Kermalab for hosting us with their space once again, and also just the many talents on Kermalab, from audio to just organizing the event and whatnot. Thanks. I'm part of Kermalab. It's kind of weird to say. But, so anyways, thanks to our team. Thank you. And then also thanks to Danny Viver and Ross Brown for helping with audio and video. Danny is a videographer, and if you, this is the second project I've worked with him on from a video standpoint capacity. And so if you do have any video projects or whatnot, please contact him or meet with him afterwards. He'd love to meet with you and talk about your next project. Well, as you know, we've got Herb C here from Think Big. Just to let you know, I'm gonna let Herb introduce himself, but we need to be careful. Herb's really shy, and he just needs a warm welcome. No, Herb is actually one of the most energetic people I've ever met. I've had several conversations with Herb, and each time I walk away learning something about entrepreneurship and what it means to run a successful company. Not only one that succeeds from a monetary perspective, but also developing a culture that lasts and is sustainable. So I've had a great time getting to know Herb. So if you wouldn't mind, help me welcome Herb C. And thank you for
Thanks, Dan. Thank you. I like how Dan advised you guys to get something to drink. I do sound better with more alcohol in you. Should we mention that there are no refunds right now?
Right. Absolutely. Before you go any further, I forgot to say the format for tonight. Last time we typically do a Q&A afterwards. I wanted to mix things up, so we're going to do Q&A during the presentation. So we're going to be talking about a lot of different topics tonight. If you have a question, or you want Herb to clarify, or you want him to go a little bit deeper, please feel free to raise your hand, and we'll stop Herb for a little bit, and we'll have a dialogue. I want this to be conversational, be a dialogue, have you guys chime in, and as long as it's on topic. We don't want to start talking about, what have you, if we're talking about funding or what it takes to run an accelerator or an incubator or whatnot. So, Herb, if you wouldn't mind, just kind of give us a little bit of your background. It's nice to know that, as we start learning from you from a business perspective, just the greater context of who you are, where you came from, where you grew up, that sort of thing.
Sure. I'm not originally from Kansas City. I grew up in St. Louis, and I arrived in St. Louis. I was actually born in New Jersey to two immigrant parents, so I'm first generation. Not sure what that means, but I was able to watch my father firsthand with a chemical company in St. Louis. He had a company at 20th and Delmar, and at that time it was a very rundown part of town, and I worked in the warehouse. I learned everything from pick and pack to how to make chemicals to work the front office, everything. He was a great scientist, but he was not a very good businessman. So I had a front row seat to what I saw what could be possible, but didn't actually take place. I ended up in Kansas City by way of sort of KU. I went to KU, got there, I'm a little bit older than some, but at that time, and this isn't, sadly, this is very true, I actually went there because of the drinking age. It was far enough away from home. You could be 18 and drink beer, and even more sad was when I went to KU, I could drink for about the first semester, then they changed the law, and I missed it by about 45 days. So I still had a fake ID, despite the fact that I went there. But I went to KU, changed my major a number of times, and after KU, after watching one too many movies, a lot of my, I think, career has been shaped by media, TV shows, movies. Again, sad but true. Saw Top Gun, decided I wanted to become a pilot, so I went in the military. I was a military pilot for a number of years, got out, and then I saw Wall Street somewhere along the way. Decided I wanted to go do the Wall Street thing, came back here to Kansas City, worked in the financial services space. I did that for 14 years. I was with Merrill Lynch, A.G. Edwards, and then Mariner Private Equity. And then along the way, somewhere in between, the story got a little confusing. In 2000, I was on the executive team with a company called eScout. We raised capital from two real prominent funds, Oak Hill and Mayfield. And at that time, it was a great business plan that so many .com startups had. We're going to lose a penny a unit, but we're going to make it up in volume. So the more we sold, the more we lost. And that didn't seem to work real well, but man, it was really enthusiastic and we were excited about that. But where all this started ended up going was in 2001, started our first real company. That company became 2 companies, became 3, became 4. That was an interactive agency. We were arbitraging pay-per-click marketing and advertising. It then started a call center. It's then started a software company, started all these things. And then somewhere along the way in 2008, I looked at my co-founding partner and great friend Tyler Prochnow and said, you know, it'd be really fun to build a place where entrepreneurs can go. You can go build things. You can walk in with an idea and walk out of the company and have a place to go and feel really good. And so we started looking for that place and we couldn't find it. So Think Big Partners really came as a byproduct of building the place that we wanted to work. And even though today it can be built as an incubator, accelerator, collaborative co-working space for entrepreneurs, I really think we're more of a factory and a fund and a network. And really it's the idea that we can help entrepreneurs. It's a salad bar approach. We certainly get a lot of things wrong often, but really we find that through collaboration of a lot of really smart people that are working together, you can get more done quickly, faster, better, working collaboratively, and we reserve the right to continue to be entrepreneurs ourselves.
Right.
So that's how we got here today.
Awesome. It sounds like there's a couple different milestones or points where you changed paths a little bit. So you go from Wall Street financial...
Today or in general?
It sounds like you started financial services, Wall Street, and then you went into entrepreneurship and started some companies, and then from those companies, then you went to Think Big, and you mentioned to Tyler, wouldn't it be fun to have a place to where entrepreneurs could come? What were the driving factors of that first point, Wall Street to entrepreneurship, and then also what was the driving point of when you were sitting down with Tyler of, wouldn't it be fun? Was there something that said, oh, this isn't fun anymore, let's go do something else fun, or talk to us a little bit how those...
They both evolved very dynamically, I guess. The Wall Street thing, the 3 things I did there, I was when I was in Merrill Lynch, I was a retail broker, just a stockbroker. When I joined A.G. Edwards, I became a branch manager and I started trading cash derivatives. And so the trading of cash derivatives was interesting to me. It's figuring things out. How could I look at interest rate forecasting and be able to look at data and figure out how to game the system and be able to create a return for the client? So I managed a little over $1 billion. And while it was really fun and great, and it was gratifying to see the numbers, what I found was it wasn't very gratifying to the extent of helping people. And I do like helping people, and sometimes, unfortunately, there's a lot of things that go with it. But I realized somewhere along the way that sometimes helping people with their dreams of companies is even more important than helping them buy stock. I mean, you buy 100 shares of Apple. I mean, that's great. But if I can invest in your dream, and sometimes the investment is, painful, but if I can invest and do something that meaningfully can allow you to be able to take your idea and turn it into something that's going to be important for you and your family, that got me really excited. And so when Tyler and I got together, we both had realized that there were a number of trapdoors that we had walked over unwittingly and a few that we fell into that we wished that we had not fallen into. And we thought we could even just save some of the pain of the problems and the mistakes that we made along the way while still connecting people to really smart people smarter than us. Wouldn't it be great to be able to combine those while still being able to help people realize their dreams? So that's kind of where it all started getting messy, and it makes total sense today.
Right.
And I am sober and under-caffeinated, but at the time I didn't really know where it was all going. But to me now, it seems like it was more of a calling, and I mean, it sounds silly, but every day we get to be helping people with things that are important to them.
Right. When did you first hear about the idea of an incubator or an accelerator, and what made you think that Kansas City was a space or a city that was ripe for something like that?
In 2006, I started getting more serious about this. And I looked around. At that time, I think there was probably 1,100 incubators, accelerators. We're on the 2nd generation of accelerators. Accelerators really started coming to market around 98, 99, and it kind of flamed out around 2003, commensurate with the .com bubble. It started resurging. If you look at Paul Graham, Y Combinator, which is probably the longest in the tooth and the most prominent in the space, they're almost 9 years old. This is not an overnight sensation. But we started looking at different models. In 2008, I started traveling the country, and I started looking at not incubators perhaps, but sort of accelerators, but definitely co-working spaces. And as an example, in California, I started down in San Diego, the Hive. There's actually 2 locations at the Hive. And apparently there's a lot of glaucoma in San Diego too, because you walked out of the Hive and there was medical marijuana, and you walked down the sidewalk and all these great crazy business plans. Maybe that's how they get their creativity, I don't know. But we started looking at incubators, accelerators. We looked at programs. We looked at Idea Lab. We looked at Innovatech, which is out of Saskatchewan. We looked at BetaWorks. We looked at, you name it. There were all these models, but there wasn't really a model that made sense to us. And ECJC is a great organization. They're a little more structured than we are, and that's great for some of the entrepreneurs. But I do know that the average tenure in most incubators is 33 months, and if you're a technology entrepreneur, you can have an idea come to fruition and die in the vine and never even make it a market in 33 months. The market might even be gone in 33 months. So we just couldn't really find the place that was right for us. It's not that places like that aren't good, it's just we couldn't find the one that fit for us. But we wanted a place that was a little bit messy, a little bit of a sausage factory, a place that people can come and go and interact, and not a stack of forms, not something that was going to be bureaucratic, and certainly not something that was going to say, you've got to do it our way. There is no way. Everyone's got their own way.
Right. So would you say that Think Big started more as a desire for a co-working space and then kind of morphed into an accelerator to where you help entrepreneurs maximize opportunity, or did it start the other way around, or was it kind of both? Did you want to do both?
I think it started as a co-working space with an incubator bolted on. And then the accelerator piece, what I like about an accelerator is the discipline and the cadence and the milestones. Although there are aspects of accelerator programs that I think do not work as well, at least not for us. We haven't been able to find them to work, but really it was getting a collection of individuals, share the resources to include knowledge, and having on-site resources too that at least we could benefit from. And usually those on-site resources could be either services we provided, but more likely people that we all have expertise. Everyone in this room has got something that they're an expert with. Wouldn't it be great if we just share it? And that was really the mentality that we had.
You mentioned that to me before, the idea of, and I think that's what you're alluding to, the unique ability. Everyone has a unique ability. And talk about how have you discovered, well, first off, kind of describe to our audience what you identify as the unique ability, and how have you worked to identify that among your team members at Think Big and collaborate on that?
The unique ability concept comes loose, well, not real loosely, but sort of loosely out of a group out of Chicago called Strategic Coach. And if you're not familiar with that group, you ought to check it out. But unique ability is really not what are you able to do, but what are you the best at? And there's some symptoms to this. And it sounds really easy to identify, but it's not that easy. But if you can find what you're good at, and the example that I usually give to people is, think about a really simple, easy task. Think about emptying a trash can. I think everyone in the room may not want to empty a trash can, but we could all empty a trash can. Well, if you start with a population of where are all the people that can do a task, and then you look at the people that are willing to do it, okay, that's now a job function. And what pay, maybe it's conditional. Where usually people stop is, who's good at it? That's the third echelon in. Willing, to do it, and good at it. I think the higher level of consciousness on the unique ability is who's going to be great at it. And the symptoms of that, think about on your most tired day. Think about the day that you're the busiest. Think about a day that you've got everything slam jam packed, but if there's some activity that you could do despite your energy level, it gives you power. It gives you energy. You do it even if you didn't get paid to do it. You do it naturally. If the person that would empty a trash can is thinking about new trash cans, thinking about new ways to empty them, thinking about new product design, thinking about all the people, they would do it even if they didn't get paid to do it. That's the difference between good to great. It's Michael Jordan playing basketball or baseball. And if you can find those people that are empowered, excited, just the fact that you think about it and are constantly doing it and getting better, you're going to be better than anyone else in your peer group and field. And if we can find people that match up, like Allison. Allison's an unbelievable writer. I think she's a better editor than writer, and she's pretty good as a writer to begin with. But I think, our team is amazing, and I think a lot of them would work for free. No one does. But it feels like it some days. But we would do it even if we didn't get paid, because we believe in it and we're good at it, we're passionate about it. And I think that's the goal of everyone. If you can find unique abilities that correspond with a job description and get paid to do it, it's not a job, it's a calling.
Right. Do you use those words a lot in your culture and moving into kind of describing Think Big's culture as far as unique ability, investment, passion, calling? Talk to us a little bit about your culture and what kind of investment from an entrepreneur standpoint, from an owner standpoint, do you put into that investment?
Well, I think it's about the people, and it's always about the people, beginning and end, and even in between. I think the culture that we have is unique, although I don't think it's so unique that you guys, many of you probably have aspects of this, and we can learn from you as well. A couple things that we've implemented. When I left, some of the more bureaucratic organizations, the things that I did not want to carry on. I hate the idea of a time-based accounting. If I've got to punch the clock, and I've got to swap my time for money, kill me now. In fact, if you're any good at your job and you get paid by the hour and you really reveal how long it actually took you, should you get penalized if it took you half the amount of time at the same rate as somebody who's doing it that took twice as long at the same rate? Does it really matter? We're very results oriented. And so with that in mind, we tend to attract a lot of self-starters. Here's some things that we do. We always are looking at better ways. We have different tactics that we use. We borrowed shamelessly and stolen from others, things that have worked and made it our own. We have no vacation policy. I know Sarah, who works in her space, I don't even know how much vacation time she took last year. I think she took like 40 days. Our problem isn't that we have vacation time. People don't take enough time off. But if you can actually take more time off and be more focused when you are on the clock and being productive, and by the way, where do you have to be? Why be anywhere? We do find collaboration works better when you sit across the desk occasionally from people. But if you can get more done in half the amount of time and find the right people, everyone's self-starters, everyone's got responsibility. We always confuse role, rank, authority, and expertise for different things in life. And it's like, just because you're whatever age, you can be an expert. Just because you have a rank doesn't mean you know better. Just because you have an expertise doesn't mean you have the authority to act it. So we are a very flat organization, and we move very quickly. And the casualty to that sometimes is we run over each other's toes or even other people's toes, but we get a lot of stuff done, but we make a lot of mistakes, but we figure it out fast to fix them.
Right. Going back to the starting or the founding of Think Big, I think one thing that I've heard from feedback from people just in conversations, what they love to know is from your biggest learning, and typically biggest learnings come from biggest failures and how you react to those failures. And so wanted to give you a little time to, whether you've had one or many failures, what you learned from that, because I know in my experience, hearing someone talk about that, more than likely than not, I've had the same experience, or I'm going through that experience now, or they already have, and learning from how they overcome that can be a very valuable thing. So talk a little bit about maybe your biggest obstacles or failures.
A lot of failures. We've had companies that we've started that seemed like a good idea that we've held on too long. We've had people, that we've occasionally disappointed, not meaning to do any harm, but, we tend to bite off more than we can chew. And when you're very fully tasked, like look at the weather for the last 2 days. When you're very wound, with a lot of, we'd like to think precision, but there's very little slack in your schedule. We jam our schedules full, but when something goes awry or something takes something out of bounds and you have to react to it and you got to prioritize, things get dropped. And so we're very quick to apologize, and we are very sincere when we do that, but the problem is that we do like to help people, and we like to try and say yes and please people too. The reality is that it doesn't always work. We also, try and make, we try and make assumptions about situations and people, and then sometimes we just realize that we're wrong. We're either wrong about the opportunity that we've constructed, or the person, this is not their DNA, and it's not right for everyone. We're not hard to start with, but we're hard to hang with just because of the culture of our organization. But my gosh, we've had so many mistakes. We've invested in technology. We've had milestones that we forgot to check. We forgot if we're solving a problem. We get over enthusiastic about things, and we forget that there's no market for it. I could give you a list just from this week, and it'd be this long.
So have any of those failures actually made you question what you were doing? I'm guessing a lot of those were early on in the stage. So at any point were you like, maybe I'm just doing the wrong thing as a whole. Maybe this isn't the path I'm supposed to be on.
Wow, I can answer that two ways. There are days where, it's exhausting. We're excited and we're exhausted. Every day we're surrounded by such smart people, and we're drinking from the fire hose, and you leave energized and totally spent. There are days where I wish I'd frankly kept my head down and just kept building companies, and I didn't mean to build this space. I just wanted a space to work in. And there are days where I wish I would have just kept my head down, and honestly. As far as what we're doing, we've made a ton of mistakes in our organization as far as the construction, but I think the mission is clear and I feel really committed to it. I think more than ever, entrepreneurship in this country, productive entrepreneurship to solve problems, you've got to have it. I mean, I could recite mounds of statistics. If not now, when? I mean, we've got to address this head on. We've got to do things, and we've got the problem of we can't stand idle. We always get involved in things that are important to us. So I don't think we've made a mistake by getting involved. I think we make the mistake of trying to get involved in too much, and then we just overcommit and we get overspent.
How has your journey like been to find that balance between overcommitting and committing the right amount?
A combination of the realities of sleep, the realities of family, the realities of occasionally a trusted partner advisor. In the last 3 years, this is my third 5-year plan. In
I'm on my second.
Oh gosh, in 1996, I started my financial services career and was killing it, did great. And in 2000, I threw it in the trash can because I wanted to go to do the .com startup thing, and it was great. But I cut my income in half and I reset the entire clock. In 2001, I started all over again. And I was in the top 0.5% in the country in the industry. I was working a job 2 hours a day that was 3 times what I needed to live, and it was less than 50% of my income. And I was so bored, so tired, and so unfulfilled. And I threw that in the trash can to do this. I think I'm doing what I was meant to do, and I think I'm doing what I believe in. And it's hard. But as far as on the way, the collateral damages, I've had a couple friends who know me well, who've known me for the last 10, 15 years, said, you look tired. You're worn out, you're ragged, you're not yourself, you're kind of grouchy. And sometimes you got to kind of take stock. And I've had team members around me tell me the same thing occasionally. And sometimes you just got to say, you know what, you're right. And you just kind of got to reset the clock. And you can't take life too seriously, but sometimes you got to just really take a step back. So, great question. We're among friends here. This is all secret, right?
We're not video recording it or anything.
So,
That's great. So, would you say as an entrepreneur, you've talked a lot about calling. Is that something that you've learned to consider more seriously as you've been an entrepreneur? Does that change, or is that something, if you're, for example, there might be students in here, or there might be someone, I think the average age of an entrepreneur that starts is like mid to upper 30s. And so going from, if you're on a corporate level or you're working another job, it's like, I've got a great idea and I want to move in to an entrepreneur. How much importance should you put on that question of, do you feel called to do this? Is that something that, business owners should be asking themselves more?
I think you have to feel a calling beyond that of just thinking that it's a cool idea and it's going to be a lifestyle and you'll have no boss. Your boss is your banker, your lawyer, your accountant, your family. You have every boss in the world, and you're the last boss in line. You do every job that you don't want to do, and occasionally get to do the job that you actually think you're going to be doing. If you're only doing it to be able to, have the scratch off lottery ticket that you're going to cash by the weekend, it always takes twice as much time, twice as much money, and that's if you're lucky. And I say that all the time, and I'd ask you guys, nodding of heads, has it ever gone faster with half as much money and time? It always takes more, right? But along the way, there's the discipline that eventually the market will catch up to you on, and you've got to make money. And we've been wrong a lot about a lot of things, but eventually, if you don't have a sustainable, profitable business, it's a charity, and it's tough to do that. And now putting my funding hat on, if you can't make your numbers, if you can't figure out a way to scale it, grow it, maintain your sanity, and bring a product to market that you're proud of, you're going to be out of business. The harsh reality is that 7 out of 10 businesses will be out of business in 10 years when they start, and then the statistics haven't meaningfully changed in 30 years. I think it's easier to start a business than ever before, and the illusion is that, we're going to start it because it feels good and along the way, but you've got to really ask yourself if it's going to make money early on. We've been wrong about a lot of recommendations, but if you know how to do it, great, but somebody's got to be able to have that plan in place at some point. Otherwise, it's a pretty big risk.
I've got a question. The statistics about the mid-30s to late 30s
By the way, was that right? I threw that out there. Is that a correct statistic?
93% of all statistics are made up 81% of the time.
I just did that.
But I believe I heard that.
I don't
You can
know.
correct me.
I actually don't know.
Well, what's your experience been? What's your gut say?
There are a lot of people who are resetting their clock kind of mid-career than ever before. You get enough time, experience, you start realizing that your opinion is more right than wrong. You get a little bit of, confidence to include a bank account that can support you and decide to, maybe take a detour and give it a whirl. I do think that the average age for entrepreneurship has gone up some, but I don't know if it's there. I really don't know. But I will say this: I know that the average cost of starting a business today, if you believe some of the studies, is about $20,000. It used to be $250,000. And so the barrier to entry is lower than ever before. And I do think that there's the combination of finding people with experience and expertise with also those people that don't know that, what do you mean I can't do this? I already did it, by the way. And it's working really well. As soon as you were told what you can and can't do, you're right. So don't listen to them. Tune them out. But you have to have a balance of a team. So I do think that there's a growing number of people. I think a great time is 28, 30, 32, 34. Before you've got the burdens of, I'll be funny here, burdens of family, mortgage payments, kids' education. It gets a lot more complex, higher risk.
So I have a question along those same lines, but I feel like I've read, and partly because I fit in that camp, is I've heard that the drive for someone who is maybe slightly older, maybe does have a family. I've got 3 little girls, I'm married. I've got to make it work. So there is a little bit less ability to say, well, maybe there's less risk, I don't know. But there has to be that drive to succeed. And I don't know if that's a factor. I don't know if you see that being a factor in things of, hey, I'm not to pick on anybody, but a young single guy that if this doesn't work out, it's fine. I'll go get another job and continue to pay for me to eat this, for the next couple of months, or go out and have fun. But when I'm thinking about that, I've got 3 little girls and a wife to support. There's a sense of, well, there's no choice. This has to work.
I think it's very real. The Vikings used to get commitment when they'd land on a new soil by burning the Viking ship on the shore. You can turn back. We're going to make it work. Talking about commitment. One of the things I used to, I kind of say this jokingly, but I'm kind of serious. When I used to hire salespeople in some of my organizations, I still have operating companies besides Think Big. If you've got a big mortgage, fancy car, and a nice watch, you've got bills to pay. You're going to make your numbers work if you're any good. And so I like the commitment, but it can't be at such an extreme level to where it becomes debilitating. But there is that lack of a luxury. Think about the movie Apollo 13. Remember I told you guys that a lot of my life has been shaped by movies? Remember the scene? Make it work where they dump all the parts on the table? It's not an option. And so I will say that there's a mentality to where if you can get there without quite that extreme condition of saying, we are going to make this work. It's not that you're not going to fail. You're going to fail. You have to know when to kind of give up. But you can give up and then start again in another form and make it work in another form. Don't be so obstinate that we're going to make this work come hell or high water. Pay attention to the marketplace, pivot, change, shape, and then go again. But as long as success in your mind is defined ultimately by doing X, who cares how you get there within reason? You just have to make it successful. So I agree with you. For those folks that do not have a choice, that are not debilitated by it, I like those odds a lot better. The will to win is very high, and resilience is everything.
I have a question. How often when you're funding a project do you get involved in the patent process, and how relevant do you think that is to actually seeing a project come to full fruition? So how many projects have you gotten involved in?
Great question. The patent process evolved a lot. It used to be, some people, if you ask them, they're going to say it's offensive. Some people say defensive. I think there's a little bit of both. The value of a patent, when you look at the valuation of a company, has gotten increasingly less. Unless Google and Motorola get in the same room, you're going to buy thousands of patents at one time. It really becomes a way, in my opinion, to be able to tie people up in court. With that said, I do think defensible ideas, whether it's barrier to entry being, adoption or IP, is very real. We're involved in a project right now to where in this category there was only one existing patent in the category and they bought it out. I do think to be able to say that you have the dominant market position with patent protection is valuable, but it cannot be the only thing you've got going for you. When possible, I would recommend it, The patent laws have changed too. You're probably familiar. Provisional patent gives you really 1 year to file. Even if you don't go to market with it, you've got 1 year public domain. If you don't file, you vacate the position. So you have to be very mindful of what being in the public market means. When possible, I think so. But really, it's there was another thing we were involved in 2007. Brilliant company. They never patented it because it would also require them to be able to, at that time, disclose their manufacturing process. And this company had a thixotropic protrusion process that used a DuPont filament that essentially created a device that they had a dominant market position, and had they filed a patent, they would have given it up. And it was a product that cost of goods sold was $18, that sells retail $672. They still have that margin today, and they did not file a patent. No one could, figure out how to reverse engineer it. So I think you have to kind of take it with a grain of salt, but I think there's some value.
Just going back to, starting a company on the topic of funding, it's a great segue I want to move into and get your opinion on a lot of different funding topics, especially in Kansas City. It's been a hot topic for quite some time, and I think one thing that we routinely hear in our work is, how am I going to get funding? I've heard that there's none in Kansas City. I read in the paper there's none in Kansas City, but there have been some press about companies that have been funded. Do you see, one, is it true? Is there no funding in Kansas City? And two, do you see the tide turning a little bit?
I do think it's changing. Predominantly, Kansas City is a growth capital market, and that's I think a little bit to credit or blame on our Midwestern roots and sensibilities. When you have market share, you've got some revenue, you've got customers that seem to be happy. It's easier to get involved. You look at,
Can you explain growth capital?
Sure, growth capital is you've got a run rate, you've got a couple customers, and now you're going to be able to expand the marketplace. It's not a proof of concept, and it's not going to be so early stage where you still have to validate the need in the market. So a lot of the folks in Kansas City, it makes sense. Okay, you've got an order today for 10 units, tomorrow for 100, and next week for 1,000. I can get on board that. It makes real easy common sense. The majority of the capital historically in Kansas City, not all, but the majority, think about the Kansas City's history. Even though we have a financial technology, information technology, and healthcare technology, we've also been a manufacturing hub. A lot of people have made their money that are older than me based on manufacturing and other plays that don't always have a lot of relevance and understanding of technology. And so if you have a technology company, you're a little bit at a disadvantage because you may scare people with your company. They may not understand that. But with that said, I think it is changing. There are some groups coming to town, both in town and out of town, that are really starting to take a different look. And what I tell folks is, one, first you have to understand not all capital is created equal. It's not just smart money. You have to understand, is capital going to take control of your company? Control or non-control investment? What's the life cycle they're going to get invested in? Angel capital is alive and well, and I think it's less organized than people believe. There are a number of high net worth investors that are looking for opportunities. But the best thing that I would tell you on angel capital is you have to create relationships with these folks. You can't just show up when you want money. The analogy that I give, and I stole this shameless, I think, from Mark Sister from GRP, was it's point to point. You only show up when you need something and they say no and you go away. You have to create a line between the points. You have to continue to educate them, stay in touch, interact with them, build a relationship, educate them on what you're doing, educate the marketplace, and by the way, they'll be able to still have you top of mind and keep in touch with you. So I think in Kansas City particularly, you create those relationships with the people that you think are going to understand what you're doing, be appreciative of the sector that you're in, and then create a relationship. I think there is more capital available today, but we're still at a significant disadvantage in Chicago and Denver and the coast. But it is changing. We're trying to do something about it too.
Yeah.
How do you make those relationships? Especially when you're building your business, you're obviously, and working hard and getting it done. And sometimes these people aren't as accessible. Are you meant to just, reach out and say, let's go get a coffee and slowly build that up, or what's the best?
Great question. A couple ways. It depends on what type of capital you're looking for. If you're looking for, $3 to $5 million, more like fund or financial sponsor type of level, that's a very different model. If you're looking for a couple $100,000, maybe up to $1 million, I still think it's a relatively early stage and angel driven model. Believe it or not, some of the best resources in my opinion are talking with those folks that interact with those investors and educating them what you're trying to find. And by the way, if you're going to try and find capital next week, today's great to talk about if you need it next week, but you should probably start it a month or two ago. they move a little slower and it just takes time and everyone's busy. But being able to talk to truly your banker, your attorney, if you're working on a big idea, the greatest thing about talking about your idea, as soon as you start talking about it and you give it away, people will start holding you accountable. I tell people this all the time. The idea that you've got to protect and hold so close that is super top secret, if it's that easy to do it, and by the way, everyone's got their greatest idea on their own. They don't want to do your idea anyway. But the more that you can give it away and tell people about it, it will actually start taking root and it'll come to life. But then people will say, oh, you got to be talking to this guy. You got to be talking to this guy. Oh, do you know? And it just starts happening. And events like this, I think in Kansas City, one of the most amazing things in Kansas City is people are genuinely interested in helping people. It's so cool. I mean, they're sincere, they're real, they're authentic. And I think if you can tell people what you're doing, what you're trying to find, and ask people for help, the best thing you do is, we need help. I'll accept help from any one of you any day of the week. We need more help than most. But if you just say, look, I need your help. Here's what I'm trying to do. Do you know anyone who can? You'll either find that they'll have no idea what you're doing and at least you can mark them off the list. Or they'll say, you ought to go talk to this person. Or they may even say, you know what, I think I could do that. But it's just a relationship. You've got to create an awareness and understanding. It just takes time. But the best thing you can do is also understand what you need, what you're trying to raise, and who would be interested in. Because there's some folks that are it's not misinformed. There's a lot of misinformation. There's some people that have been told, things that are just not true about equity. And there's no absolute truths, but some of the truths are, you need to talk to somebody who's actually done it, been there, done that, understands it. Because there's a lot of, oh, you must do convertible debt. Oh, you must do warrants. So you've got to do raise in the public market. Oh, IPO is the way to go to raise capital. It's like, oh my God, there's not a one size fits all. Everything's very conditional and subjective, and it's got to be right for you.
When would you typically suggest to someone that it's good, a good situation to go to an angel investor as opposed to a bank or something like that? Is it true or is it a misconception that a lot of times you're going to give up more when you go to an angel investor? Or what do you see?
I think angel investors are probably one of the best rounds as far as fairness for capital. It's the next round that usually gets you. And by the way, not all investors and VCs are evil. There are really a lot of very good people that are trying to be helpful, but they've got to make their numbers. You got to understand, the returns that they've got to hit. But as far as going to them, again, going to organizations like this, going to meetings, whether it's Mid-America Angels or Angel Capital Group, or talking at whether it's conferences or whatever it may be, it takes, in my opinion, not years, not necessarily an entire year, but it takes months. People are busy to go out of town. Think about the seasonality. If you try and start that conversation in November, they haven't already been digesting it since October and November. They're thinking about holiday shopping and wrapping up deals that they're trying to get closed. So you got to think about the pacing. I think that if you were to start those conversations, and there's no rule of thumb, what we found, 90, 120, 180 days, it allows enough due diligence, time to get to know somebody, ask around, references, comfort. You're not pressuring people. And in the same token, there's some pacing, because one of the worst things in the world is there's no deadline, there's no trigger, and then you just string it out. And by the way, you don't need capital, you're out of business. So I think most people in this town, or even in the Midwest, you give them give them several months to start talking about it, interacting with the idea, and then you really have to find some impetus to really see if they're serious or not. It's not, it doesn't have to be mean-spirited or force the issue, but you've got to find out, because there are a lot of people that talk about writing checks, but very few do. And you got to find out if they're really, truly motivated. And you can just ask them nicely, but just ask them, is this a good time?
A question about valuation. So we're in this battle right now as we start making our pitches to angels, and you've got one partner who thinks we're the best of the best, and then you have others who think, well, maybe we're being a little too aggressive. So folks who come to you and say, this is what we are worth, what do they need to back up their argument?
A really cool PowerPoint. You know what? It depends on where you're at. If you are purely conceptual, I think you need to be able to demonstrate the logic of, one, why the idea makes sense. Second, why you're a team that can probably get it done, and why, why in the marketplace this will be something that within the amount of time it's going to take for you to build it, They're going to be able to deliver to market, silver market waiting to happen. And then it'd be nice to be able to understand, the margins. The problems with some of the traditional valuation methods, like price to earnings, there is no earnings. How do you divide by zero? So let's rule that one out. Discounted cash flows, I can show you anything you want to see, using discounted cash flows because there are none. But I think, depending on where you're at, there are some models that have been out there that seem to be getting accepted. When somebody sets a term sheet, when somebody says, yeah, we're kind of in the neighborhood, okay, I'm willing to put money in there, at least now you set the market. The accelerator model, the whole 7 or 8% for $18,000, roughly $250,000 to $400,000, roughly. And that's back of a cocktail napkin, maybe a little bit better. When you actually have a product that you've built something, you can at least demonstrate the technology works. I think immediately you start upticking. You add in executive team, domain expertise, maybe access to markets, and there's some other known extensions. I think you start ending into the approaching $1 million to maybe 1 to 3 million. But I think the reality is that I think you've got to be able to demonstrate the path to profitability. How's it going to take? What's the cost of capital to build it? What's the cost of capital to obtain it? What ownership position you're willing to give up? I assume that you're going to get diluted at least 3, if not 4 times. And then look at what is the path I need to take to get there, because it is truly at some point whatever somebody's willing to pay early stage is what it's worth. But if you can at least have the logic and have some comps, or at least say, look, hey, here's why I think it makes sense. I think there's a range to most things. I mean, there are goalposts on each side. But if somebody comes in saying, I've got a big idea and it's worth $25 million, and by the way, I'm going to give it to you and walk away, and I want 90%, ownership, I mean, you're just going to get laughed out of the room, or it's so disrespectful. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's good.
But there's actually, I've got something, if you want, I can send it to you, but there's a matrix that we've found. Again, there's no absolute right answer, but it does set some of the goalposts.
Yeah, we're done. Thank you.
Sure, absolutely.
So talk us through Think Big's process of funding. When a startup comes in, are they admitted as a part of the accelerator? Do they have to be in the accelerator program to get funding from Think Big? Walk us through your process, how you walk through startups.
Sure. We don't have a very absolute process, but the process that we do have, we're pretty well defined. You can be in the accelerator and not get funding, I guess, theoretically. Okay. You can be in Think Big and we won't fund at all. You can be somebody that we fund that you don't even show up what it is. What we tend to like are things that we have an understanding. We've got domain expertise and some experience in it. If we can add value, and I know this is the same stuff everyone says, but if we can add value by picking up the phone, making introductions, getting your first customer, opening up marketplaces. I mean, some of the portfolio investments that we've made, we've already demonstrated that we do that. As much as capital is great, I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to use it to market. You're going to use it to get your first customer. What if we just give you your first customer along the way? It improves our risk matrix, and frankly, it stretches your capital too. It's non-dilutive. So it really depends, but from a general standpoint on the fund, we do have an investment committee. We don't have a formal investment window. We do have people that send something in. It is amazing out of all the calls that we get. We have people that are convinced they've got the next best, amazing, you name it. The Snuggie, the Optigrab, the Pet Rock. We're going to do silly bands. This will be called funny bands. I don't know what it's going to be called. And we say, great, go and submit your business plan, and then they never even show up. Right. But yet they want to argue with somebody on the phone why we should fund them yesterday and why they're going to become the, oh gosh, I've got so many funny stories.
Tell one. You don't have to, I was just...
Well, no, we're in a safe place, right? We had an organization, they're not in town. They were convinced, literally they said, we don't exist yet, but we're going to put Kraft out of business. Kraft. You guys ever heard of Kraft with a K? Kraft, right? My kids know Kraft. I like the macaroni and cheese too. They were going to put Kraft out of business. They were going to create a food product that you've never heard of and I've never eaten and you've never even seen. But we're going to create a marketplace, and not only did they start telling us it was going to be amazing, they said, we're going to send you a sample. Okay, the sample never showed up. We're going to send you a business plan. The business plan, by the way, if you could take every business plan program you've ever had and put them all together, but keep all the same pages, it was like 500 pages. And there were words that I don't even know what they meant. I'm not even sure they were words. I'm not even sure they were English. And then you do that, and then you ask if we've read it the next day, and the answer is no. And then you start complaining, yelling, arguing with us, and then you start stalking us. That really works well. It's kind of like, if this is dating right now and we're going to get married, is it going to get better when we actually give you money? You got less interest in being compliant? Oh my gosh. We could tell you stories. But the reality is that those folks that have a practical view and understanding how the game works, we need to move fast. When we funded iVerify, Toby Rush, phenomenal operator, even more so, great human being, great guy, solid guy, rock solid, engineer mindset. We don't put people through a funding process that takes, we already knew about him. We knew his track record. We were vaguely familiar with the data. We had one meeting and we gave an investment decision in 2 hours. Not everything works like that, but we kind of know what we're going to fund when you meet it and you see it. Because we already have domain expertise. We already know the people. We already know the story. We already have an understanding of the marketplace. We have to get comfortable with the details and generally come to terms and conditions that make sense. Most of the work is already done going into the meeting. Does that make sense? But we do have an investment process. But please submit something we can look at it. We don't really read business plans, but we are going to ask for, give us an executive summary, give us a financial model, and why you think you got something that makes sense. If you send me 80 pages, I'm not going to read 80. If you send me 8, I will definitely read 8.
If possible, do you want to see something that works from, if it's a technical standpoint, an application or a prototype? Is that something you guys look for?
It helps, but in absence of it, we'll look at the opportunity in the person, but that certainly moves the valuation down.
An issue that was put forth in the September issue, I think, of KC Business Journal by Peter De Silva. There was a great article in there. Obviously, he's leading the Chamber's Big Five initiative, making Kansas City the most entrepreneurial city in the United States. There was 2 issues: a lack of communication and pooling of resources between investors, and also a lack of communication between the investors themselves and what startups are available. That made sense then, but there's just so much press nowadays about startups that are coming through different programs. And so do you think that's still the case? And if it is, how do we fix that? How does the entrepreneur community, the startup community in Kansas City fix that miscommunication to where investors no longer have the ability to say, oh, I didn't know. I'm wanting to invest, but I didn't know.
I think it is changing. I think it's getting better. I think we still have more work to do. From an investor standpoint, I think the impetus to some degree needs to be on them. There are more programs, more opportunities. Million Cups, what a great idea. You've got no excuse if you haven't heard of the Kauffman Foundation and you want to be interested in entrepreneurship, shame on you. If they can't make it out to Kauffman Foundation once a week to be able to see something that, I think the last one they had was 280 people, they're just not working hard enough. But to the degree that I think entrepreneurs and investors need to be able to get in the same dialogue, I think there's so many initiatives that are really meaningful, and I think there's a lot more organizations that are right for somebody. Not everyone is right for everyone, but hopefully somebody's got somebody. I think there's a lot of different programs. So I think the investors can go to the different places in town, can inventory, can talk with, and hopefully find a place or a couple of places that are, places they can plug in, receptacles that make sense to them, to their unique DNA and their investment criteria. But it does require work on their part. But I think we need to do a good job of educating the investors that not everything's going to be the winning lottery ticket again. Not everything is, early stage technology is still high risk. And lastly, just because you don't understand it, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't respect it. And I think that's a really big disconnect, but I think it is changing. And I think Kansas City is doing a lot to change it.
Right. Do you find yourself or think big serving as, or trying to serve as a liaison between those two entities at any times? Do you try to ever reach out to other investors or, kind of the idea of sharing or partnering? Is that something that you take a step in doing to try to raise awareness?
We do. We'd like to think we do, at least. I should ask you guys if you think we do. As you roll, your opinion matters more than ours. But, I'll give you an example. In the co-working space, I'm not really even sure what co-working means anymore. There's a lot of co-working spaces in town. But our model is very different than some great models like OfficePort, which is very different than Innovation Cafe. But as an example, we held a meeting not too long ago. Aaron Deacon, who is a great guy, who's on his own mission, asked us to be able to convene all the co-working spaces. Now, the reality is that we called every single one, and I'm not naming names, and I respect the co-working spaces, and everyone's busy. The problem is that if you're really successful, you kind of keep your head down, you're getting stuff done. You don't have time to go to every meeting. If you go to every single meeting, you've got to ask yourself, what are you actually doing? How do you pay your bills, right? So, the confusion and the misinterpretation is just because that we don't show up in every meeting, or people don't show up at every meeting, they're getting stuff done. But you got to pick and choose your battles. But we convened a meeting. Not every co-working space showed up. Some because they're too busy, and some because, frankly, they're burnt out or they don't want to play, and that's okay. So the bus will go around. Everyone is willing to get on the bus the first time. Let it get on. Let's everyone come on. But we do try and play a role of at least starting the conversation. I love the number of activities and the number of groups like you guys are, what you're doing today. You guys saw an opportunity, saw a problem, and instead of talking about it, you just did it. So I think we try and do some of the same.
What about for startups that decide to bootstrap themselves? What the limited amount of funds they do have? What advice would you give someone who is bootstrapping how to maximize or get the most bang for their buck?
Two thoughts. The first one is that when we first started this, I had a parallel universe, I guess. What's moonlighting? I don't even know what a day job is anymore. I mean, how many people here have day jobs and you don't know which one it is anymore? Right? You kind of do what you have to so you can do what you want to. So the longer you can figure out a way to be able to balance that, maybe it's a lack of sleep, lack of hobbies that you used to enjoy that one day you'll be able to do even more so. But the ability to be able to mitigate the financial risk and be able to stretch your capital or be able to get more runway by doing something that you're actually getting paid for, I think is really important. And so when people tell me, well, but I can't make every Chiefs game anymore, it's like, well, okay, you got to make your choices. What would you rather do? We used to have a saying, if you work, like 5 years, but by the way, remember my 5-year plan? If you're willing to work for 5 years like no one else, you can live like no one can for the rest of your life. But it's not just about the money, but if you can find ways to mitigate the financial risk, if you can find ways to be able to ask for help early and get people to help you early on. And then lastly, I think co-working spaces, stretching resources and being able to work with really smart partners that have beneficial interests, why not work together?
From an accounting or bookkeeping standpoint, when you're starting to you talk about being strapped, how do you get the help that you need to organize your financial affairs so that you can go when you finally reach a point that you think you can go ask for larger money, bigger, investors? How do you try and track all of that besides a shoebox?
Well, shoebox is better than some.
That's true.
You know what? You've got to do a couple things. I mean, you at the very least, you've got to keep good records that at least you can reconstruct. Keeping receipts certainly not only helps you organize what you're doing, but also starts demonstrating that you are coachable, you've got financial discipline, and you're able to at least track the numbers to where if you don't even know if you're going to make money or aren't able to show that to a bank. I mean, banks can be a great source of funding, but they will not lend it on your good name or note from home or just a promise. But really, you've got to take the time. When we built Think Big Partners, one of the premises was spend more time working on the business than inside the business. But if you neglect the insides of the business, things eventually catch up to you. And we're guilty of it too. We're entrepreneurs. We're moving 100 miles an hour with our hair on fire some days. But being able to spend time with people that can actually circuit break some of the problems that you're starting to create for yourself, take the time to slow down, take the time to actually get some of the things done that you've got to. You can last for a while, being held together with duct tape, but not forever. So what I encourage you is every once in a while, just stop and ask, not, how do I move forward, but what would cause me to come off the rails and how do I fix it? I'm more worried about what I'm not expecting than the opportunity in front of me, but what's going to kill me. I think I work more out of fear than I do out of opportunity. And so, the financial piece will get you, following the laws, that tends to kind of work badly. Have total disregard for your ultimate customer, that doesn't usually work out very well either.
Great.
Does that answer your question?
Good point.
You know what? Banks are good sources of information. Accountants are good sources of information. Or ask an entrepreneur who's a little bit further downstream about all the things that they really did screw up. You can ask me off camera. I'll tell you all the things that we had to recover from and bail out from.
Well, the banks would require a certain amount of,
But they're a great source of advice too. You find the right banker. There's some great banks in town. They will act as an advisor and a mentor to you if you allow them. It's less scary than you think. There's some great banks in town.
What do you, when you're looking at the different teams that are coming in to either talk to you or just from your experience over the years, what does an ideal executive team look like for you? What is that thing where you go, man, it's that combination left brain, right brains, meets business. I don't. What does that look like? Where have you seen successes? The answer is, of course, always not. There isn't one solution, but what have you seen successes from?
I'll give you a statistic. The ideal team, according to stats, which are not absolutely achievable, is 2.03 co-founders. I mean, the 0.3, can we throw that and just say 2? Think about that. Why is that? Well, if you have 2 people that don't look identical to each other, one's sick, one's well, divide up the work. Many hands make light work. Maybe you've got complementary skills and personalities. At least in our space on the technology side, we like to have somebody who's got a business orientation to it, ideally business orientation, maybe a sales orientation, and then we need somebody who's a technical co-founder. We run an assessment on our accelerator companies, and it's called a modified Hogan. And it actually looks for adverse behavior that can, under certain stressful conditions, can be derailer. And so if you look at, if you're really extroverted, you should probably have somebody who's less extroverted, because all you're going to do is socialize all the time and no work gets done. But it'd be really bad if your sales guy's the introvert. That doesn't work real well. One of the things that we measure is mischief. Being mischief. I mean, everyone in this room, there's a level of mischievousness in all of us here, otherwise you probably wouldn't be attracted to this lifestyle. But you've got to have the permission to break the rules. If you're the chief innovation guy and you are absolutely rigid in your design and unwilling to break the rules because of the fear of consequence or not even mischievous, you're probably not the best person leading product design or innovation piece. So ideally, we look for teams that are, my ideal would be deep domain expertise with experience, unbelievable access to the markets. They can pick up the phone. They already know who they are. They don't have to convince anyone that they're credible. Usually that sounds like somebody who's older with some experience. The other side of the equation is somebody with a really fresh insight, fresh legs, fresh insight. When people graduate from college, they're on the top of their game in a technical field. They know more right there, and your knowledge starts going down. From a practical application, it gets better for real life, but if from a textbook, it's as good as it's ever going to get, and it's going to start degrading from there. If you can combine those two things, if you can have the technician who, the entrepreneur is overrated. The people that actually do a lot of the real work are the technicians in the field. You got the manager, the technology person, the people that do the work, and then lastly, it'd be great to have somebody who's kind of, managing all the people together. The law school model of finder, binder, grinder, minder. The finder, business, go get the business. The minder is the manager. The binder is the person who keeps everyone internally. The other guy is the external guy, and the grinder is the one who's actually doing the work. If you can find a team of a couple people, but by the way, 3 people, and even worse, 4 co-founders. 4 co-founders have, I think, a higher failure rate than a single founder, because a single can always add on. 4, you've got too many cooks in the kitchen.
What about 3?
3 is better than 4. 2's optimal. But here's the deal. And by the way, 50-50, red flag as an investor, 50-50 on the cap tables, horrible. I'd rather have somebody wrong, but with the direction, than stalemate because 2 people are mad at each other. It doesn't work. I could tell you horror stories about that. I like 2. You can have more on your team, but if you really were to look at co-founding team, 2 works really well. Doesn't mean you don't listen to them, but somebody's got to make a decision.
Moving on to more of a topic, just entrepreneurship in general. You mentioned, you watched Top Gun and you decided to go into the Army, which, bold choice, but just
I wasn't smart enough to go into the Navy or Air Force, and didn't realize that they weren't quite as cool. But
just in the last several months and even years, there's been a lot of initiatives to support veterans in entrepreneurship and really allow veterans to use the skills they've learned on the battlefield in the business world. Do you feel like that experience of being in the armed forces, being a pilot, has helped you in your entrepreneurial journey?
Yes. I was a helicopter pilot. I flew Chinooks. My non-wartime mission was Hangul search and rescue and firefighting, which, by the way, firefighting, those guys are dropping like flame retardant. The dirty secret is that the Department of Forestry guys never follow the rules. We're flying into a big smoke on a traffic pattern to this way. They're coming at you in an aircraft twice as fast, and it doesn't work real well if you hit each other. But, as a helicopter pilot, I take off expecting to crash. It's a rotor blade on top of we're turning jet fuel into noise. It doesn't want to fly. It's a brick. A plane wants to fly. You kill the engine. You talk about commitment. There's no ejection seat. You're flying this thing into the ground, so you're going to learn how to do that. So Having Plan B in our hip pocket and C, D, and E, I mean, Activate Health, that was supposed to be Tuesday. I think we're on plan like L right now. But I think that served us well. And then the other thing is adaptability. I mean, I'm proud of what we do, but I have no pride in how we get there sometimes. I'm willing to sleep in a hole in the desert. I mean, the one thing I'm proud about our team is you won't outwork us. We may come in tied for first with you guys, but if we really want to do something, we'll come in tied together. But it's the idea of, put down your pride, understand that we're all on the same team, understand the mission and the objectives. Let's all focus on that, figure out how to work together in collaboration, and let's do that. And I think having that attitude of saying, look, I don't care what it takes, let's just do it within reason. Let's do it. And it's more fun to win together. And by the way, I think the win-win is true. The win-lose scenario is not a good one. I think being in the military, you learn a lot about win-win. You give concessions, but ultimately the goal's achieved.
Talk about how do you find that balance in your life? We mentioned earlier, the balance between family, work, rest, hobbies. How do you personally, do you have any routines? Do you have any, what have you implemented in your life to keep that balance? Or are you bad at that balance? And can someone speak to Herb about that?
All my kids or my wife here. And, you know what? Right. I think reasonably speaking, we've done a good job. First of all, I mean, I don't live to work. I love what I do, but I work to live. Without my family, without my kids, I mean, this wouldn't really work very well. I've been married for 20 years. My wife has kind of figured me out, I think, really well, and she kind of has learned to deal with me accordingly. And again, without her support, I couldn't do this. But what routines? I don't sleep a lot. I kind of work binge. You catch me on a Sunday night, there's a good chance at 2 a.m. I'm up. I will invest a lot of time creating ridiculous lists. In any given day, you can probably find me with a 3x5 card or a list, and it's what I'm going to get done that day. It doesn't always happen, but the force multiplier of having a well-organized day and knowing exactly what you got to do. I mean, if I'm on my car, that means I'm on my phone. If I've got 3 minutes, I'm doing something. I mean, my team, I think we all work that way, but I mean, I try and maximize every single available minute. When I'm on. But I'm also proud to say, I've got a 14-year-old son who goes to Rockhurst. I coached him for 13 seasons in soccer. I'm involved in hockey. I'm coaching soccer for my 8-year-old coming up this season. My wife and I actually like each other. We go out on date night. I'm all in for whatever mode I'm on. I'm kind of, that's just how I work. But what I've given up is some of my hobbies that I used to like. I like playing guitar. Haven't done that regularly in a long time. I like photography. I still do that on occasion. But, my family comes first and last. But sometimes putting your family first means that you're missing dinner like tonight. You guys are all here because you're committed to what you're doing. For me to be able to put them first, sometimes they're going to come second because ultimately they always come first. And so I balance it out. I've got my routines. I'm very conscious about time management. And by the way, when we're in a bubble, just like our vacation, even though I will pick up my phone if I'm on vacation we talk about this, I'm in a bubble. Unless it's an emergency. And by the way, what am I going to do? If I'm out of town, I'll make it feel better. You're going to figure it out better without me. I'm not going to call you if you're on vacation, and you can call me, but no one ever does. Frankly, the team runs better without me most days. Does that make sense?
Remember that. He said that.
Is it true? I mean, our team is so good. I mean, we're all on autopilot with a mission. So I'm proud of our team. I'm proud to be on the team.
What would you say your unique ability is, and what are your weaknesses that your team that you've brought together kind of helps fulfill?
Oh, we have to triple the team to get all my weaknesses. My unique ability, I think, and I'd really be curious to ask my team this. I think I've been really lucky at being able to find really good people and find opportunities and combinations and situations where I can bring everyone together and make them successful. It's like the old BASF commercials, if you guys remember that. I don't do a lot of things, I just make things better. And really, I think the ability I've always been able to see to some degree what I think is possible, and then I can find people and hopefully give them the opportunity to really take their unique abilities and then get stuff done. And really then I should just get out of the way. But I think, my unique ability is being able to see where I think things can go and then find the right people to get them there and then just leave them alone. My weaknesses, my God, I still bite off more than I can chew. I still drink too much coffee. Is that really weakness? I try and do too much, and I think the greatest thing about it is that they've learned that even if I raise my hand, they say, no, you're not doing this anyway, we're doing this. Or we've kind of learned that, we have funny bets. I just lost a bet 2 weeks ago to somebody in our office. I said, if I don't do this one thing by this time, I owe you $100, and it's a 2-part bet. I ended up giving this person $50 because I did get one of the things done. So I bribed myself for compliance. But I think our team has learned that if I don't get back to them in a certain amount of time, you know what? Ask for forgiveness, I guess, for permission to go. Just get it done. And frankly, they're right 9 out of 10 times anyway. And if they're wrong that 1 out of 10 times, guess what? If you're not getting it wrong, we're not trying. And what mistake can't we usually fix? The worst thing in the world is not doing anything. I'd rather do something and be wrong than, let it be wrong by not doing anything at all.
Personally, are there any types of startups that you're waiting on to catch your eye? Meaning, like, are there any sort of spaces or industries that you're just personally waiting on? What's that next big thing?
Time machine. I want a time machine. I want a coffee dispenser in my shower. You know what? I don't know what we're looking for. I just know that when it hits us and when it finds us, if it captures our attention, it means it solves a problem, we can relate to it, and we can add value. That's what gets us excited. That's the greatest thing. We don't even know what we're looking for, but we know it when we see it. And so the biggest thing that we're looking for is we like stuff that faces the consumer. We like things that solve problems. We like the problem to have a threshold of pain that ideally or exists to some degree in the marketplace that's not being fully satisfied, to where then you can, back into the economics. If I can, offer a bottle of water for half the cost, or repackage it and give it to you in a different, unit that solves a different problem because, you drink this and you're still thirsty and you only want another half a bottle. I like things that already exist to some degree, and it's not a total bad. But honestly, I don't always know what we're looking for. There's stuff that hits us that's like, oh my God, this is brilliant. So,
Have you got a top 5 of what you're involved with right now?
a top 5.
Top 10? Whatever. 3?
Yeah, gosh, you know what? In all fairness, it shifts because situationally, there's some that are like in our accelerator program that frankly, like there's 1 or 2, and I'll kind of smile, and you guys may know who I'm talking about. There's 1 or 2. One of them never even showed up. It's awesome. Hey, we're part of the program, but we're not going to do it. We'll take advantage of some of the things you're offering, but you know what? Shame on you. This is a 90-day program. What do you mean you're already producing revenue? You're not supposed to produce revenue until day 91. But I'd really rather not name because really I'm proud of all the entrepreneurs that we work with.
Maybe just the type of industries.
Type of industry, sure. You know what? Gosh, think about things in your daily life that you would ask yourself, what could I do? I've got a picture on my wall. If you've been in my office, I've got a glass wall. It looks kind of crazy. But there's a picture of a device. And it's it's like a remote control. I think it's a remote control for a garage door opener. I've had it up there for about a year. Ask what thing could you do if you put that device in your hand now? Think about this. 3 years ago, you couldn't adjust your thermostat. You couldn't know if somebody's in your house. I couldn't start my car. I couldn't unlock my car. I couldn't do a banking transaction maybe easily with this, something I trusted. I couldn't do a lot of things. What could you fit in the palm of your hand that you now takes another form factor? That stuff gets me really excited. The access, convenience, all that into the smartphone market, I think that's just brilliant. That's stuff that I get really excited about. I think things that save lives, I know that sounds really altruistic, but it's very real. The price of saving a life, I'll say carefully, we're involved in a project right now that is something that we all should consider. I've really tried to be better, I think I am. I no longer text while driving. I'll text at stoplights, but I won't text while driving, at least not 99% of the time. But really, I should be doing that 100% of the time, not texting while driving. If we can solve problems like that, they're really big humanity issues, life issues. I get excited about stuff like that. I want to solve problems that are less about just cool, neat, discretionary. I want to solve problems like, oh my God, why didn't I think of that? This would improve the quality of my life immediately. Stuff like that immediately. It doesn't have to be my quality of life. It has to be somebody's quality of life that has a business to conduct, a mission to perform, a function that they've got to get done better, cheaper, faster, more seamlessly, easier in some way. That's the stuff I love.
But typically it's been tech, phone, sort of.
It's not always tech. I mean, as soon as I say that there's a absolute, there's always an exception. You know, again, but if the story makes sense to us and we can believe in the person, even if we can't help them directly, we love trying to help get people connected to other resources in town or anywhere in the country. We took 10 companies out to Silicon Valley in February of 2012. Really, in my opinion, only 8 were fundable. I'm proud that 7 of those 8 got funded. Wasn't purely by our efforts, but we got them into a shape, and I think we were good at selecting investable, fundable companies. I mean, when we showed up to the Silicon Valley Bank showcase, they were shocked. You know, they thought they were going to lower the bar to like the level of a basement window, you know, so low you could roll out of it and cross over it. They thought, you know, as a freebie, we'll give you one spot, but you got to show something good. They had 20 companies, Silicon Valley Bank showcase. We were 15%. We had 3 companies there of the 20. And they kept saying, Kansas City? Tractors? Cows? Farmers? You guys have internet? You know, I think that's changing. I mean, Startup Village has got the eyes of the world. I mean, I think we're changing the perspectives really fast. You guys, you know, the commercial in the Super Bowl, so God made a farmer. I mean, I'm not a farmer, don't know anything about farming, but I love taking the Midwestern work ethic and taking that to another level. I think that's what we're all about.
Have you guys ever like scouted anyone out? I mean, I'm sure the majority of it is people coming to you and wanting to be involved in the program. But have you ever had anything catch your eye where you actually were like, hey, we want you to be a part of this?
Not to the degree that we'd like. We, sadly, I think if I had, you know, 2 biggest failings, you guys said earlier, 2 biggest failings, one of my biggest failings is I am a well-intended, horrible communicator. We are so overwhelmed by email and phone calls and things that we just bite off more than we can chew that that unfortunate circumstance doesn't allow me to be able to reach out to the companies that I sometimes really would love to reach out to. And sometimes the companies that find you, while really good, are the ones that, you know, it's like, gosh, if I just would have had the time. I am committed in this calendar year to respond to more emails better and to be able to reach out to those companies that I think we can help. And it has more about, I think we can move the needle and help them than it is about purely economics. But economics are included to some degree, but not every single time. Does that answer your question? We need more time to work proactively, not reactive. We're always a little bit frantic because we just, and that's not a good way to be long term.
Is that a goal that you're looking at for this year or?
Very seriously. I think we'll either be dead in an insane asylum, have some horrible drug addiction or alcohol, you know, habit or something else, or we'll be walking around talking to ourselves if we don't get a better handle on being very purposeful. We've got to keep our head down more. It doesn't mean that we don't reach out more, but I think we have to do more by doing less, and I'm dead serious about that. I mean, our team hears me talk about it all the time. We've got to do that, and that's the reality. We got to go deeper by doing more with less so we can be more effective and be more meaningful to produce the outcomes. I think the best thing we can do, frankly, in this city is create jobs now. You know, we've done what we can. The conversation started. It was already happening before us. We just hopefully helped amplify it. But the best thing we can do now is create those companies, create those jobs that will create more attention on Kansas City with more wins. And it's just now, if we can get the capital to reinvest, that's what we haven't had. We haven't had a couple really good exits where they then piled on capital right back in the market. That would solve the capital issue. That's my goal next.
What are your personal metrics for success? Not only for, I guess, a 2-part question. How do you define success for Think Big, but also how do you define success for you?
Let's talk about me first, right? No, I'm just teasing. I think for success for me, do I feel like I'm doing something important? Do I feel like I'm making a difference? I was making all types of money in 2008, and I didn't feel like I was making a difference. And it would have been so easy, and there are days where, frankly, it'd be nice to have one day a week back there, but if I feel like I'm making a difference in people's lives, and it sounds like total crock, I really do want to help try and change the world with other people, but the best thing that somebody can ever do is privately. I don't need any public anything. You tell me that I made a difference in your life, you say thank you, and I helped you do something, my God, that's everything. I mean that. But on the same token, I want a place at the table too. I want to be able to help my family as well. I think for the organization, I think if we can look back at some point in time, that we can say we played a role in numerous ideas that came to fruition, that created something important, that changed the lives, that created jobs, that became profitable, that then people were able to reinvest that capital. And then I look at our team and I've helped them realize their dreams. I've got people that have got such great ideas, and that we believe in ownership, and I want people to own a piece of everything that we do. But if I can ask somebody, like Sarah's a rock star. And all of her, I'm so proud of everyone I work with. But she, we helped her start a company. She wanted to do a project that wasn't really within our wheelhouse exactly. We said, you know what, why don't you start a company? We'll form it, we'll advise on it, we'll help you build it, we'll even help you get your first customer. We'll even use resources. Our team rallied around her, and we actually let her, not only, she did it, and she killed it, but, she learned through the eyes of being an entrepreneur now, of forming a company. But that was important to her. She wanted to be able to be a business owner and start a company to do something. And so, you know what, I love being able to have that on her checklist of saying done. And so I always ask people when they start at Think Big Partners, I make them write down their goals as a condition of employment. I want to know your goals going in, not my goals, your goals. And I hold on to them, and I'm going to revisit them. And I want to know how we're doing on your report card, not my report card, your report card. So it's got to be a win-win. And if we're not hitting your report card and you're not happy being here, then why the hell are you here? But it's got to be. We have a. I've got to sing. I want to know, generally speaking, what you're working on, not because it's a micromanagement, but it's top-down strategy. 80% of the time, the other 20% is your time. Go break stuff. Go do what's important to you. Go get involved in whatever makes sense to you. So I think ultimately for Think Big, if we all can be serving all of our mutual aligned goals, but our individual goals, and be meaningful for the city and the ecosystem here, and all of us can one day look back here in this room and say, you know what, capital's no longer a problem. Kansas City's well respected. I've got kids that want to come back here because they think Kansas City's cool. We've got so many jobs. We've got so many things that we're doing. I mean, that would be a gigantic success. I would have loved that.
Right. Last question I'd like to ask everyone, just going along with the theme of Start with Grind, how long do you plan to continue to grind it out?
You know what? I don't think I'll ever really retire. I think I'd be bored. I'm a horrible golfer, and I couldn't play enough golf to ever become better anyway, so I might as well give that up. But the ability to not have to work, I'm 46 years old. I had a goal when I was 45 that had a lot of metrics in it, and it was really weird. Years ago I took a goal-setting class. It sounds crazy, and you write down your goals. It's like religion to me, and it's shocking in how many things come true if you actually just write it down and start thinking about it. I hit my goals at 45. I've got a pretty big goal for 50. By the time I'm 50, I will have the ability, if I achieve my goals, that I could be done. I won't be done. I think I should become even more effective for people because I don't have to work. But I've invested a lot of time, money, sweat equity, sleepless nights, heartache, heartburn, as our team has done too. And we still have a ways to go, but we're almost there. But I'd like to be able to say another 3 to 4 years of grinding this out. But then really I think I'm just going to get started. But I would love to be able to continue on in this ecosystem as I believe in it. I mean, you can't get this out of your system. I'm not doing this because I couldn't get another job. It's because I believe in what we're doing. And again, it's so stupid. It's the American dream. I grew up drinking powdered milk, to 2 immigrant parents. And I think if I can help other people accomplish dreams and my family's dreams, that's everything.
Does anybody else have any questions for Herb?
George. That's me.
Yeah,
Okay.
George.
I have 2 questions. The first one is kind of along the same lines of what you're getting at there. But what would you say keeps you up at night? What keeps you from sleeping?
Worrying about people, relationships. Can we be doing better? Am I doing right by people? It's not because I always think we could be doing more. That keeps me awake at night. I'm more worried about what can go wrong than what can go right, and it always is about the people. I want to make sure that we've got the right people. They're happy, they're challenged, they're getting what they need. We're doing good work by clients, and I'm always thinking that we could be doing better. I always think it. I mean, very rarely, even, I'm really proud of what the work we do, but A+ is for me. I'm not sure if I'm capable of giving myself ever an A+. Our team probably deserves it, and I think they get A- and B+. So I always think we could be doing better. It's not because I'm satisfied, but I think that there's always room for improvement, and it's not because does that make sense?
Someone did not know what that means.
Siri, what do I mean by that? I always want us to be doing the best work that we can for people, to include ourselves and our team.
Okay, so second question. It's a question that we kind of ask at Woman Cups, but something I'm really excited about is twofold. What can we do for you? What can the community do for you? We're all passionate about what's happening in Kansas City. There's a lot of events happening. There's a lot of people trying to build things. What are you passionate about seeing Kansas City doing? What should we be doing better? Maybe not necessarily what's happening just within Think Big, but what can the community be doing better to be growing more successful companies? I think revenue obviously is a big part of that conversation today, but there's a lot happening here.
Yeah, I think, I think taking the time to get to know each other. I mean, deals don't get done overnight. And, I always tell people, be careful your judgments and assumptions. Half of the assumptions are usually not completely true, and be careful of labels. As soon as you label somebody, you're going to be wrong. And you might be surprised. You might have just ruled out something. I think being a little more patient, being a little more understanding, being a little more compassionate with each other. I mean, again, this is a great city. I think being able to understand that we can all get along and still occasionally disagree. And sometimes just creating relationships and knowing that, just because you may not always get somebody, but take that extra second or two. Kansas City's got so many great people. We're trying to do so many things. And I think being able to really understand, and even if, we're not right for somebody, it doesn't mean that we don't respect them, for their passion and their well-meaning. But I think just being able to take the time to just try to peel it back a notch. I've been wrong about people in the last handful of years, and I've learned that you can't judge, but I will say this. There are times where you just have to realize, look, you're going to make mistakes. Everyone deserves a permission slip for mistakes, and I think just a little bit more, just taking it down a notch and building some more relationships is everything. Because again, we're all in this together, and I think if people were to ask us, take the time to get to know us and understand who we are, who we're not, and again, and I think the city. I mean, we can all just be benefit. There's nothing wrong with being a cheerleader, but there's a difference between being a cheerleader and a doer. And neither one is better than the other, but just understand there's a difference. We all need each other. We just have to understand the role we play.
First of all, thanks for the chat. It was very insightful.
Thanks for listening. I'm glad you guys all stayed awake.
Do you have any resources that you would suggest for startup/entrepreneurs, books, websites, anything that you get a lot of value out of?
Oh man, it depends where you're at, what you're looking for. The 4 Steps of the Epiphany, love that book. The Medici Effect, Franz Johansson. Borrowing Brilliance, David Murray. Those 2 books, the premise is that there are solutions all around you that occur already in nature, and if you just kind of borrow, steal, shamelessly reapply those solutions to your problems, you might find half the solutions already done. I think there's a lot less unique thoughts than people realize, but they're unique combinations. As far as the resources, it really just depends on what you need. I think everyone has something very valuable to offer to each other. But I always caution, myself included, there's a difference between having an opinion and having the person be able to recognize it as only an opinion versus having the experience, even if it was a bad outcome. If I were to give you advice on something I've never done, and you take it and I get it right, I mean, I'm just getting lucky, frankly. But even if I give you advice on something that I have done, even if it did poorly, you know at least one time that it didn't work, and at least you can make some judgments. I think the resources that you look at, make sure that they're qualified to give you a perspective, and then frankly, there's no absolute truth. Make sure, you know, common sense in the back of your head prevails, and it's got to be right for you. But I think always being able to find somebody who's qualified to give you some perspective, and whatever that is really important. So, but I've got a whole bookshelf full of books. You're welcome to come over anytime. I'm happy to lend them to you. There's some great books, but again, I've also got a bookshelf of half-read books too. So I've got ADD.
At least you started.
I beg your pardon?
I said, at least you started then.
Well, I read fast. I skim. I graze.
What were the books again? I didn't hear you, the author.
You know, the three that I like, that I can recall right now, Four Steps to the Epiphany, really good one. And there's actually an extract to that. I can't remember. It's a blue book. It's really short reading. It's like 2 or 3 pages, kind of little.
Steve Blank.
Is it the Steve Blank one?
Steve Blank.
Oh God, I love that. It's like a synopsis of all these different great books. It's phenomenal, and it's cheap. And it's paperback. That and then the Medici Effect. The Medici Effect has got so many great stories, and really the stories are more about, you know, things that you can find, and also if you just kind of cock your head and look at it a little bit differently and let it kind of sit and look at the application that it could, you know, take in your world of what you're trying to do. I mean, it's just brilliant. And then David Murray, who was actually a speaker at Hackavit, who just left, Borrowing Brilliance. I mean, again, same thing, and really the power of the idea that you let sit and germinate and kind of take on a life of its own is everything. But you know, there are a lot of great books, but there's a lot of great, you know, bloggers out there too. I mean, you know, the Steve Blanks, the Mark Sisters, you know, there's so many great columns. I mean, frankly, I think the two that read especially the most are Allison and Blake. You ought to ask them. They've got some great opinions. I think I read. I just kind of graze.
Well, Herb, thanks for coming. Let's give Herb a round of applause. That's it for tonight. I do have to apologize. We had set up a black box, but we just didn't do it. I totally forgot. So the black box was just to put questions in that we were going to pull out and ask you, but we've run out of time. So come to the next Startup Grind. We will do a black box. So anyways, thanks for coming. Everybody drive home safe. Thanks.
That was fun.
Thank you very much.
Did you do okay?